Good afternoon. We are going to talk about the interest rates and capital account today, and we will discuss the Mandel-Fleming model, which relates the interest rates with the capital flows. So, till date we have been discussing about the open economies, but the open economies were in context of the marginal propensity to import. The marginal propensity to import in an open economy was greater than the marginal propensity to save. Now we explicitly take into account the capital flows and how interest rates have an impact on the capital flows. So now the interest rates have two effects, one on the absorption, on the expenditures, and the other on the balance of payments. So the Mandel-Fleming model, which came in the 60s, talks about how interest rates affect the capital inflows and outflows. This is a very simple description of the Mandel-Fleming model. On the y-axis, we have the domestic interest rates. On the x-axis, you have the capital inflows and capital outflows. So what Mandel-Fleming model is saying is that if the domestic interest rates exceeds the foreign interest rates, you would see a capital inflow. And if the domestic interest rates are lower than the foreign interest rates, you would see the capital outflow. We are yet to discuss the impact of the exchange rate changes. We are not bringing into account the exchange rate changes which may happen if you put the capital in a foreign country. We are not discussing that. We are just discussing that capital flows is a function of the differential interest rates between domestic and foreign. So if the domestic interest rates exceeds the foreign interest rates, you will see a capital inflow. If the domestic interest rates are lower than the foreign interest rates, you will see a capital outflow. Reason, because higher interest rates gives higher returns, so you see an inflow of capital. Now if this KK curve which you see is upward sloping, this assumes that there is imperfect substitutability between domestic and foreign bonds. That means if the interest rates increases, if the domestic interest rate is greater than the foreign interest rate, you will not completely switch out of domestic bonds into foreign bonds, because foreign and domestic bonds are not perfectly substitutable. So the reason that you have an upward sloping curve is because that there is imperfect substitutability between domestic and foreign bonds. If there was perfect substitutability between domestic and foreign bonds, as soon as the domestic interest rate is, say, lower than the foreign interest rate, there will be a sudden shift, complete shift out of the domestic bonds into the foreign bonds. And that differential will not remain any differential after some time. It will come back to a level where the domestic interest rates will be equal to the foreign interest rates. So if there is perfect substitutability between domestic and foreign bonds, you cannot see a differential to persist over time. The KK curve would be horizontal in this case. If there is imperfect substitutability, you will see the KK curve to be vertical. If there is no substitutability between domestic and foreign bonds, the KK curve will be vertical. So three cases: one, an upward sloping KK curve depicting that there is imperfect substitutability between domestic and foreign bonds, a horizontal KK curve showing that the domestic and foreign bonds are perfectly substitutable, and a vertical KK curve saying that there is no substitutability between domestic and foreign bonds. So this is the most simple description of the Mandel-Fleming model. And so if there is imperfect substitutability, you keep on investing in foreign bonds if they are fetching you higher interest rates. Okay, so the capital will persist. Capital flows will persist. This doesn't talk about the exchange rate at all, constant, nothing, we haven't talked about the exchange rates. Now, as soon as you bring in the exchange rates and you have a flexible exchange rate, and what you do is that for internal balance, you have the interest rates on the y-axis and you have exchange rates in the x-axis. Now see how instability will come in the economy. So the only difference between what we have been discussing so far is that instead of the expenditure policy, the tax rates and the interest rates, we have now put interest rates here for the internal balance, and we have exchange rate for the external balance. And this is a case of flexible exchange rates. Now when you have capital mobility, see what happens to this FF curve. Up till now we have seen that the FF curve is takes a shape which is this, and here with capital flows the FF curve has a slope like this. It's more flatter. It's more flatter. Why? Again, look that it's downward sloping. It's downward sloping because with an increase in pi, it leads to a switch in expenditure from foreign to domestic goods. It leads to increase in pi leads to depreciation of the currency. Depreciation of the currency leads to an improvement in the balance of payments. So the only way to bring back your balance of payment surplus into an equilibrium is to have a lower interest rates. Now when you have lower interest rates, you will have higher income through the Keynesian multiplier. Higher income would mean higher imports. Higher imports would mean that your surplus will come down. But that's not the only effect on the balance of payments. Interest rates have other effects. If interest rates go down, according to the Mandel-Fleming model, if the interest rates go down, there will be a capital outflow, so your balance of payment will quickly come back to equilibrium. So interest rates have two effects. One on the absorption. This is what you have to internalize. This is what needs to go inside your head, that when interest rates come down, it has an impact on absorption, expenditure, and on balance of payments. And that's the reason that you see a flat FF curve, because a small change in interest will bring back changes which will bring back economy back to equilibrium. And I will have equations which will show that the slope is such that the FF curve is flatter than the earlier case when the FF curve was steeper. To just recall, let's look at this diagram where you had a set of stable instruments. Again, come back to that diagram where you had expenditure policy, you had tax, and you had interest rates. So both monetary and fiscal policy was on the y-axis. If you moved up, it would mean more restrictive expenditure policy. If you moved here on the right, it would mean depreciation of the currency. Now this is a case of flexible exchange rates. So you cannot be out of the FF curve, because in a flexible exchange rate, you will always have a balance of payment equilibrium. And any change in demand and supply will change the exchange rates. And there cannot be any balance of payment deficit or surplus. The changes in exchange rate will curb the deficit, will curb the surplus. So see, if you are at point A, you are above the YY curve, so there is unemployment and there is a balance of payment surplus. So if you have a balance of payment surplus and if you have unemployment, think of a scenario where capital inflows take place. So when there is a capital inflow, it would lead to a balance of payment surplus. When it will lead to a balance of payment surplus, you would require less restrictive expenditure policy. And if you recall the equations, the FF curve will shift down, it will shift to F dash F dash. So immediately when you will see capital inflows, it would lead to appreciation of the currency. The movement will be from A to B, but B is still above YY where you have unemployment. So when you have unemployment, you have to adopt less restrictive expenditure policy. So now see the difference between how the economy moved in fixed and flexible. Here the economy will not come to the YY curve, but it will move from B to C directly. Reason being that the economy cannot be out of the F dash F dash curve. You cannot have a balance of payment disequilibrium when you have a flexible exchange rate. So the movement will be A to B, B to C, then C you are below YY, you have inflation, so you adopt more restrictive expenditure policy. You cannot come to this point D, but you will come to a corresponding point D dash. So C to D dash. D dash you are above YY, you are above YY curve. There is unemployment, so you adopt less restrictive expenditure policy. You cannot come to YY, but you come here. So movement is this, then this, then this, then this, then this, and then finally to the equilibrium point. Okay, so an appreciation, then a depreciation, then an appreciation, then a depreciation, and then finally to the equilibrium point. This was the case when you had capital inflows and you had a flexible exchange rate and you had stable set of instruments. There were no capital flows like what we see now, what's happening nowadays. These capital flows, what we saw, at least in the face of the East Asian crisis, what triggered the crisis was a sudden outflow of capital from the so-called Asian tigers. 150 billion US dollars moved out of these 5 East Asian countries in 1997. So you see lot of movement of capital taking place. I'm not saying that it's only a function of interest rates. When we discuss more about it, you'll see capital flows is a function of so many things. It's not only the interest rates, but there are other factors which are also important. So what determines FDI inflows? There are other set of factors which are important. But this is the first theory which related capital flows to interest rates. Now as soon as you bring in capital flows here and you have a flexible exchange rate, it brings instability in the system. So then you need to change the set of instruments. You will just see that monetary policy, then the stable set of instruments would be that the monetary policy goes for maintaining external balance and fiscal policy goes for maintaining internal balance. Earlier, we were clubbing monetary and fiscal policies together for taking care of the internal balance, and for external balance we had the exchange rate. So here, when you have the capital flows coming in, you can keep your exchange rate as outside the system, you can maintain it as it is, and you can have monetary policy for internal balance, monetary policy for external balance and fiscal policy for internal balance. And so if you keep on fixing the interest rates for internal balance and pi the exchange rate for external balance, see how the instability comes in case of a flexible exchange rate. So you have capital flows here. So it's the Mandel-Fleming type of framework where you have capital flows. So the FF curve is flatter now because interest rates tend to have an impact on not only absorption but on balance of payments also. So there's an increase in labor force. When there's an increase in labor force, it leads to an increase in target level of income. So you need less restrictive expenditure policies to achieve higher incomes. That means the YY curve shifts down. So this is the new YY curve. You are above the YY curve. You have unemployment in the economy. And because it's a flexible exchange rate, so you are at point P, there's a balance of payment equilibrium. The only problem is that now, in context of P dash, you have unemployment in the economy. So when you have unemployment in the economy, you adopt less restrictive expenditure policies. You should come here, but because it's a flexible exchange rate, you do not come here, you come to a corresponding point which is, say, P double dash. P double dash is a point which is below y dash. So you have inflationary conditions. If you have to achieve the internal balance, you adopt more restrictive expenditure policy. So you go to this point. From P double dash, you are below this YY curve. So the corresponding point is a point here. So from here you move to a point like, so the movement is P to P double dash to P triple dash, then some point here, and so you never reach an equilibrium which is P dash. You never reach the equilibrium which is P dash, which is an intersection of y dash and the FF curve. It is different from this because here you would move to the equilibrium point this. Here, see the movement. First, there's an increase in labor force. The y dash comes here. You need to read P dash. This is above this. So you have a situation of unemployment. Yeah. No. from
P double dash.
yeah, P double dash to
Y. We should only go to Y dash, Y dash.
let's see. I think so. Let's see. Okay, maybe small correction. Let's see whether the diagram is made correctly or not.
Let's see. Okay.
Okay, correction. See the FF curve, it's more flatter, but the YY curve is like this, and the slope of the YY curve is greater than the slope of the FF curve. So when we derive the equations, we will see that this happens. So I think I had incorrectly made the diagram where this was more flatter, this would be more steeper, because so I have to prove that the slope of this is greater than the slope of this. Okay. So if we had worked with the equations, we could have got this. So we'll come back to the equations and then we will see what happens. Now let's see. Okay, so here was the situation. There's an increase in labor force, so the YY curve shifts down. So the YY curve shifts down. You have a situation where you have above the Y dash curve, you have unemployment. And because it's a flexible exchange rate, so you will not move out of the FF curve. Now see what happens. Less restrictive expenditure policies, but you cannot come to the Y dash you come to a point like P double dash. This is below the Y dash curve, so you have inflation. If you have inflation, more restrictive expenditure policy, you cannot come to this point, so you move to a point which is P triple prime. And this goes on, you will never reach a point like P dash. So what was missing in the earlier diagram was that we need to compare the slopes of the FF and the YY curves. And of course, if I say that FF curve should be flatter, I need to derive it through the equations. So this is instability if you have the interest rates for maintaining the internal balance and the exchange rate for maintaining the external balance. Yeah. So the reason that we are keeping this is because we are saying that interest rates have two set of effects. One is on absorption and the other is on the balance of payments. So let us keep the monetary policy as your instrument for maintaining the internal balance and your exchange rate for maintaining the external balance. This is by assumption. Okay, monetary policy for internal balance and this pi for external balance. Now when you derive that equations, you could have had fiscal policy for that, for maintaining internal balance, and pi for maintaining external balance. The same set of results would have come. So the result shows that in the wake of capital flows, monetary and fiscal policies have to be assigned different set of policy targets. Monetary policy for external balance, fiscal policy for the internal balance. So let's derive the equations, because we need to show that the slope, we need to compare the slope of the FF and the YY curves here, and then we will show a case where you would have the stable set of instruments in the wake of the capital flows. So the equations are the same. dy is equal to 1 upon s plus m, daa plus dhe, and instead of dna you have dna dash plus p1 c1 star e pi pi dot. So dy s plus m daa, but we need to open up dag, which is dg minus sr minus ir dr plus dna dash plus p1 c1 star e pi pi dot. So then dr becomes 1 upon sr minus ir daa, this is dd, so this is dg minus dt plus dna dash plus p1 c1 star e pi pi dot minus dy s plus m. So remember DAG, the policy induced expenditures, DAG was dd minus SR minus IR dr, D was G minus T, government expenditure minus taxes. So you get dr is equal to 1 upon sr minus ir daa plus dg minus dt plus dna dash plus p1 c1 star e pi pi dot minus dy s plus m. Now look at the slope is 1 upon sr minus ir, and there is a direct relationship between r and this difference sr minus ir. What happens if the interest rates goes up? If the interest rates goes up, SR goes up, IR goes down, because there is an inverse relationship between I and R. So SR minus IR is a positive. As R goes up, SR minus IR is positive. If R goes down, savings goes down, investment goes up, SR minus IR is negative. So the slope earlier was tan 45, but now it is 1 upon SR minus IR, an angle which is lower than 45 degrees. But we haven't still answered how we'll compare the slopes of this with the slope of the FF curve. This is the YY curve. YY curve's equation is this. Only thing is that we have brought in rate of interest on the left hand side, and on the right hand side all others are shift factors. This comes with a slope 1 upon SR minus IR. Now let's see the slope of the FF curve. Okay, let's see the slope of the FF curve. The FF curve, dn S upon S plus M dna dash plus P1 C1 star E pi dot minus M upon S plus M daa, and dag is d minus SR minus IR dr. Okay. Yeah, see, it will be an angle which will be lower than 1 upon SR minus IR. What is important is to compare the slope of YY and the FF at the end, isn't it? The slope of the YY and the FF curve. And I am saying that this is a positive amount if the interest rates goes, say, increases, this will be a positive number, right? So 1 upon that positive number. Importantly, we should compare the slope of the FF and the YY curve. Then we will get this instability in the system. So that's what happens with capital flows. You will see that interest rate has an extra impact. It has an impact on absorption, it has an impact on the balance of payments. So let's work out the slope of that and then compare it with this slope. Then we can say. Now look, dn s plus m s dna dash plus s p1 star c1 star e pi pi dot minus m dA a minus m dd, which is dg minus dt, plus m sr minus ir dr. So if you take this term there on the left hand side, minus m sr minus ir dr, and these remain as it is, with dn term going there, and remember dk plus dn is equal to 0, okay, because if you are on the FF curve, k plus n is equal to 0, that is capital account balance plus the current account balance plus the capital inflows is equal to 0. So from here you get minus 1 SR minus IR S plus S by M DNA dash S by M P1 C1 star E pi pi dot. I want you to concentrate on this and this. 1 pi dot and R have a negative relationship. If pi dot goes up, R has to go down. Why? Because pi dot, if you increase pi, there will be depreciation, there will be improvement in the current account balance, there will be a balance of payment surplus. So if you have to take care of the balance of payment surplus, you have to reduce the interest rates. It has two effects, one on the absorption, the other on the balance of payment. If the interest rates goes down, the incomes goes up, the imports go up. If the interest rates go down, there is a capital outflow. So the balance of payment surplus comes back to equilibrium. So the slope which is attached to that pi dot term is S by M, and with a negative sign 1 upon SR minus IR. One is this. This is the slope of the FF curve, and the slope of the YY curve is this. Which one do you see has a lower slope? And remember, it is a negative sign, so it's an angle which is greater than 90. Why not? This is S by M into 1 upon SR minus IR. This is 1 upon SR minus IR. It was S by M for the FF, 1 for the other. So S by M was greater. Yeah, but can you look at this S and M? Can you look at this S and M? Now, so think of two scenarios, when S is greater than M and when S is less than M. Remember, this is an open economy, right? So M can be greater than S. Now, what do you think will happen to this? To this, if M is greater than S, it's an open economy. Earlier it was 1 and it was S by M. It was a normal economy. Now we are in the 60s and the 70s and 80s. We are an open economy, marginal propensity to import much larger. So if this is greater than this, what can you say about this slope and that slope? that we will do when we bring in the capital flows. We can put dk and dk as a function of the rate of interest, but before that I want to understand the relationship between interest rates and pi, because we want to analyze this particular thing. When we do that particular thing, when we put dk, what I would show is that we'll see a relationship between interest rates and tax rates, because monetary policy will go for maintaining external balance, fiscal policy for the internal balance. I don't want to do that. I just want to understand this diagram and see in an open economy context, when I say that interest rates have two effects, one on the incomes absorption and the other on the balance of payment, how is it translated in these equations? So if m is greater than s, right? So this will be a fraction, right? This is 1 upon SR minus IR. So you will see that this slope will be lower than the slope of this. And therefore, this slope would be lower than this slope. Now, the diagram has to be made in such a way that the this is not a tan 45, it's not 1. So it has to be like this. But then what is important is that you need to show that this slope is lower than this slope. That's the... Okay, so tomorrow we'll see, we bring in capital flows, we'll replace this by dk, and then we'll express k as a function of interest rates, and then we'll bring in another diagram where you will have monetary policy for external balance, fiscal policy for internal balance. Both, because we've brought in capital account, and we are saying that because it's an open economy, it's inviting capital from abroad. It's an open economy, okay, where MPM is greater than MPS, and because it's an open economy, we have brought in the capital flows.
But we have not considered the capital effect, capital flow. It is just that you are saying it is an open economy, that's where the curve is, the slope is.
So you can bring in this dk here, and you can replace this. But then this is happening because, remember this term, that dg term, we opened it to be dd minus sr minus ir dr. Okay? And so we are explicitly taking into account this interest rates. And when you say slope is the impact of for a unit change in exchange rate, what is the change in the interest rates? Okay. What is the relationship between rate of interest and the exchange rates? Okay. The others are of course the shift factors, but the slope means that we want to understand this impact on the dr, which works out to be this. It was only s by m. Earlier it has become 1 upon minus s by m, 1 upon sr minus ir. Because you want to explicitly bring interest rates. Why bring in explicitly interest rates? Because here you see that interest rates also have an impact on the balance of payments. That's the reason. Okay. But because interest rates have an impact on investment, savings, absorption, so that's the slope that works out here. All right, thank you.